Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the Terra Nova. His hands gripped the metal rail as he watched the massive alien ship appear from hyperspace. The alien vessel was huge, 10 times bigger than his own ship. Dark metal covered. Its surface and weapons stuck out from every side. These weapons could turn entire planets into dust. Jake had read the reports about the Vorthok Empire. Every star system in the galaxy knew their name. When the Vorthok arrived at a world, most species surrendered right away. Those who tried to fight were crushed completely. The Vorthok had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. The alien race came from a planet called Kethmer. It was a terrible world where everything tried to kill you. The gravity was 3 times stronger than Earth. Acid rain fell from the sky every day. Even the smallest animals on that world could bite through solid metal. Living on such a deadly planet had made the Vorthok into perfect killing machines. Each Vorthok warrior stood 8 feet tall. Their skin was like natural armor that could stop bullets. Sharp claws grew from their hands, and these claws dripped with deadly poison. Their reflexes were so fast that most other species could not even see them move during a fight. They had 4 eyes that could spot enemies from miles away. Commander Lisa Grant walked over to Jake. She held a data pad in her hands. "Sir, the diplomatic team is ready. All first contact rules have been reviewed." Her voice stayed calm, but Jake could see worry in her eyes. This meeting would decide if humans would be accepted as equals in the galaxy or marked for destruction. Jake nodded and looked at the data again. Human ships had somehow survived 3 Vorthok attacks in the past year. No other species had ever done this before. That was why the Vorthok had agreed to this meeting. They wanted to understand how such small, weak-looking creatures had managed to escape their mighty warships. The human race had only joined the galactic community 5 years ago. Most alien species saw them as cute but harmless. Humans were small compared to other races. They had no natural weapons, no thick skin, and no special powers. But somehow, when Vorthok ships attacked human colonies, the humans had fought back and lived to tell about it. Jake walked to the communication station, opened a channel to the Vorthok ship. The screen flickered and showed the inside of the alien vessel. Everything was dark metal and sharp edges. Red lights cast scary shadows. On the walls, a massive figure appeared on the screen. This was War Chief Thaxmer, leader of the Vorthok delegation. His 4 eyes stared directly at Jake. Scars covered his armored face, each one telling the story of a different battle. His claws tapped against his throne, making sharp clicking. "Sounds human," Thaxmer spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. "I have come to see what manner of creature dares to resist the Vorthok Empire. Your species interests me. Most beings flee when they see our ships. You stayed and fought. This is either great courage or great stupidity." Jake kept his voice steady. "Or Chief Thaxmer, welcome. We thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Humanity seeks peace with all species in the galaxy." Thaxmer laughed, but it sounded more like a growl. "Peace, little human. The galaxy knows only strength. The strong rule, the weak serve. There's no other way. Your ship survived our testing raids, so you have earned the right to speak, but speak carefully. Your words will decide if your species lives or dies." 20 minutes later, the airlock doors opened with a loud hiss. Jake and his team waited in the main meeting room. The walls were painted white to make the room feel peaceful. Fresh flowers sat on the table, and soft music played in the background. Lisa had suggested these touches to help create a friendly atmosphere. The floor began to shake with heavy footsteps. Thaxmer entered first, his massive body barely fitting through the doorway. Each step made the reinforced metal floor groan under his weight. Behind him came 5 elite Vorthok warriors. Each one was covered in battle scars and carried weapons that looked like they could cut through starship hull plating. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Vorthok filled the space with their presence. Their 4 eyes moved constantly. Studying every human in the room, Jake could feel them looking for weaknesses. Planning how they would kill everyone if the meeting went wrong. "Thaxmer, sat down in the specially built chair that could support his weight. The chair creaked as he settled into it. So, humans, tell me about your species. What makes you think you can stand among the great powers of the galaxy? Lisa stepped forward. She had practiced this speech many times. War Chief, humanity comes from a world called Earth. Our planet taught us to work together and solve problems in creative ways. We believe that cooperation makes everyone stronger. One of the Vorthok warriors made a sound like spitting. Cooperation is for the weak. Strong take what they need and crush anyone who stands in their way. Jake watched Thaxmer carefully. The war chief was studying the humans like a scientist looking at insects under a microscope. Your world, Thaxmer said slowly. Tell me about this Earth. What dangers did you face? What made you strong enough to survive our attacks? Dr. Helen Carter, the team's scientist, answered. Earth is not an easy world to live on. We faced ice ages that covered half the planet in snow. Volcanoes exploded and blocked out the sun for years. Giant rocks from space crashed into our world and killed most living things. Disease, earthquakes, floods, storms. Our planet tried to kill us in every way possible. The Vorthok warriors looked at each other. They understood dangerous worlds. Our own planet was a nightmare of deadly creatures and poisonous air. But here's what makes Earth different, Helen continued. The dangers kept changing. It's just when our ancestors learned to survive one threat, a new one would appear. Ice would turn to fire. Dry land would become ocean. Safe food would become poison. Nothing stayed the same for long. Thaxmer leaned forward. This was new information. On Kethmer, the dangers were always the same. Acid rain, strong gravity, deadly predators. The Vorthok had evolved to handle these specific threats perfectly. But constantly changing dangers? That was something they had never faced. So your species learned to adapt quickly, Thaxmer said. It was not a question. Yes, Jake answered. We learned that the strongest plans can fail. The best weapons might not work tomorrow, so we learned to think fast, change our methods, and try new solutions. We learned that surviving means being able to become something different when the world changes around you. The war chief was quiet for a long moment. Round the table, his warriors shifted uncomfortably. They were used to their leader being completely confident. But now Thaxmer seemed to be thinking hard about something that confused him. You speak of change as if it makes you stronger, Thaxmer finally said. But change means uncertainty. Uncertainty means weakness. How can a species become powerful if it never knows what it will face next? Jake smiled. Because when you never know what comes next, you learn to handle anything. We may not be as strong as the Vorthok. We may not have your natural weapons or armor. But we can look at any problem and find a way to solve it, even if we have never seen that problem before. Thaxmer stood up suddenly. His warriors tensed, hands moving to their weapons. But the war chief held up one clawed hand to stop them. Interesting, he rumbled. Very interesting. Tomorrow, we will see if your words match your abilities. I will test your species properly. If you pass, you may live to serve the Empire. If you fail, he did not finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. As the Vorthok delegation left the room, Jake felt the weight of his species' future on his shoulders. Tomorrow would determine whether humanity had a place in the galaxy, or whether they would become just another conquered race in the Vorthok Empire. The real test was about to begin. 3 days passed before War Chief Thaxmer called for the testing to begin. Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck above the main arena on the Vorthok ship. The room was huge, with metal walls and bright white lights that hurt his eyes. Everything about the alien ship felt cold and sharp, like a weapon that could cut you just by looking at it. Lisa Grant stood beside him, watching as the Vorthok prepared their tests. Sir, are you sure about this? These tests could kill our people. The Vorthok don't hold back, even during demonstrations. Jake nodded grimly. We don't have a choice, Lisa, if we refuse their tests. They'll mark us as cowards and destroy every human colony in the galaxy. At least this way, we have a chance to prove ourselves. Down in the arena, Vorthok workers were setting up different testing areas. One section had combat platforms surrounded by energy barriers. Another area was filled with broken machinery. and scattered tools. A third section contained large screens showing star maps and battle formations. Thaxmer's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. Humans, the testing will begin now. Your species claims to be strong through adaptation and change. We will see if this is truth or lies. 3 tests await you: combat, technology, and strategy. Fail any test, and your species will be marked for conquest. The first test was hand-to-hand combat. A Vorthok warrior named Grixel stepped into the arena. He was smaller than Thaxmer, but still stood 7.5 feet tall. His natural armor gleamed under the lights, and his claws looked sharp enough to cut through steel. Scars covered his arms and chest, proof of many battles won. Sergeant Pete Collins volunteered to represent humanity. He was a good fighter, trained in multiple combat styles, but he looked tiny next to the alien warrior. Pete weighed maybe 200 pounds. Grixel probably weighed over 600. "This is not fair," one of the younger Vorthok warriors whispered to another. "The human is too small. This will be over in seconds." Axe. But Thaxmer heard the comment. "Fair? There's no fair in the galaxy, young one. There is only strong and weak. If the humans are weak, they deserve to be conquered." The fight began with a loud horn blast. Grixel charged forward like a living tank. His claws whistled through the air where Pete had been standing just a moment before. The human rolled to the side, barely avoiding death by inches. Pete moved constantly, never staying in one place for more than a second. Grixel was faster and stronger, but Pete was smaller and could change direction quickly. The alien warrior grew frustrated as his attacks kept missing their target. "Stand still and fight like a warrior," Grixel roared, swinging his massive fists at empty air. Pete didn't answer. He was too busy studying the arena, looking for anything he could use. The Vorthok had built this place for their own kind. Everything was designed for beings with great strength and thick armor. But that also meant there were things a smaller, more flexible person could use differently. Pete grabbed a piece of loose metal from the floor and threw it at one of the overhead lights. The light exploded in a shower of sparks, creating a moment of darkness. In that instant, Pete moved behind Grixel and kicked at the back of the alien's knee joint. The Vorthok warrior stumbled, but didn't fall. His armor protected him from most damage, but Pete wasn't trying to hurt him badly. He was trying to make him angry and careless. Grixel shouted, "Face me properly!" Pete continued his hit-and-run tactics. He used the arena's support beams to swing around attacks. He threw dust and debris to confuse his opponents for eyes, even used the energy barriers that surrounded the fighting area, bouncing off them to change direction in ways Grixel couldn't predict. After 20 minutes, the massive Vorthok warrior was breathing heavily. His species was built for power, not endurance. Pete was still moving fast, still finding new ways. To avoid the deadly claws, Grixel made one final desperate attack, putting all his strength into a charge that would have crushed Pete instantly. But Pete had been waiting for this moment. He stepped aside at the last second and grabbed onto Grixel's arm as the warrior passed, using the alien's own momentum. Pete threw him into the arena wall. Grixel hit the metal wall hard and slid to the floor. He tried to get up, but his legs wouldn't support him. The impact had stunned him completely. Pete stood over him, not trying to hurt him further, just showing that the fight was over. The arena fell completely silent.
Oh, yeah.
No one had expected this result. The watching Vorthok stared in shock. Their champion had been defeated by a creature half his size. The second test began immediately. Chief Engineer Amy Rodriguez was brought to a section of the Vorthok ship where critical systems had been deliberately broken. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and warning lights flashed red everywhere. "Your task is simple, Thaxmer," announced. "Repair the main power distribution system using only basic tools. You have 2 hours. If you fail, this section of the ship will lose all power, and everyone inside will die." Amy looked at the Vorthok technology with wide eyes. Its everything was built like a fortress. Thick cables, heavy machinery, and control systems that seemed designed to survive wars. The Vorthok way was to make everything as strong as possible, then use brute force to make it work. But Amy came from Earth, where resources were limited and people had to be creative. She studied the broken systems and began to see patterns. The Vorthok had built everything to last forever, but they had also made it very rigid. When something broke, their only solution was to replace it with an identical part. Amy started working with tools that seemed too small for the job. Instead of trying to repair the systems the Vorthok way, she began creating workarounds. She rerouted power through secondary systems that the Vorthok never used. She bypassed damaged control circuits by connecting them directly to backup systems. Watching Vorthok engineers grew confused. What is she doing? Those connections make no sense according to our manuals. But the system started working again. Amy had found ways to make the technology function that the Vorthok had never considered. She finished the job in 90 minutes, 30 minutes ahead of schedule. The third test was given to Admiral Karen Walsh. She was brought to a war room filled with star charts and tactical displays. Thaxmer presented her with a scenario that had puzzled Vorthok military leaders for generations. Here is the situation, Thaxmer explained. Command a small fleet. Your enemy has twice as many ships, better weapons, and control of the high ground around a strategic star system. Karen studied the tactical display for several hours. The Vorthok had always approached this problem the same way: find bigger allies, build better weapons, or wait for the enemy to make a mistake. All of their solutions involved becoming stronger than the opponent, but Karen saw other possibilities. She began moving pieces on the tactical display, showing a plan that made the Vorthok officers shake their heads in confusion. "You're dividing your forces," one of them said. "That makes you weaker, not stronger." "Not if the enemy doesn't know what you're really doing," Karen replied. She showed how small groups of ships could create false signals, making the enemy think attacks were coming from multiple directions. While the enemy moved to defend against these fake threats, the real attack would come from an unexpected angle. "This requires lying to the enemy," another Vorthok officer protested. "Where's the honor in deception?" "Honor doesn't win wars," Karen said simply. "Smart tactics do. The enemy expects you to fight like Vorthok warriors. They're prepared for strength and direct attacks. They're not prepared for confusion and misdirection." She continued explaining her plan. It involved making the enemy defeat themselves by reacting to threats that weren't real. By the time they figured out the deception, it would be too late. Thaxmer stared at the tactical display for a long time. His officers whispered among themselves, clearly disturbed by these new ideas. Everything they had learned about warfare was being challenged by this small human female. "Your solution would work," Thaxmer finally admitted. "But it requires thinking in ways that no Vorthok would consider natural. How did your species learn to fight like this?" "We learned by fighting each other, War Chief. Humans have been at war with other humans for our entire history. We learned that the enemy who thinks like you is the enemy who can predict your moves. So we learned to think differently, to fight in ways that surprised even ourselves." As the tests ended, Jake could see the confusion in Vorthok faces throughout. The ship. Everything they believed about strength and weakness was being questioned. The humans had won not by being stronger, by being different. Thaxmer called for a private meeting with the human delegation. As they gathered in his quarters, the war chief looked troubled. "Your species has shown abilities that we do not understand. This requires further investigation. Tomorrow, we will discuss what these demonstrations mean for both our peoples." Jake knew that the real challenge was just beginning. They had passed the tests, but now they had to help the Vorthok understand what those victories actually meant. The strongest species in the galaxy was starting to doubt everything they thought. They knew about power. News of the human victories spread through the Vorthok fleet like wildfire. In the lower decks of their massive ships, young warriors gathered in small groups to whisper about what they had seen. For the first time in their history, someone had beaten Vorthok champions without using superior strength or better weapons. Sub-Commander Kethver was one of these young warriors. He had watched all 3 tests from the observation deck, and now he couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. The humans were so small and weak-looking, yet they had won every challenge. How is this possible? It makes no sense, Kethfer said to his friend Drixmel as they walked through the ship's corridors. Grixthal is one of our best fighters. He has won over 50 battles against other species. How did that tiny human defeat him? Drixmel looked around nervously before answering. The human didn't fight like anyone we've ever seen before. He kept changing his tactics every few seconds. Just when Grixthal thought he understood the pattern, the human would do something completely different. Other young Vorthok overheard this conversation and joined in. They had all been taught that strength was everything, that the powerful ruled the weak by natural law. But these humans had shown them something that challenged everything they believed. Meanwhile, in his private quarters, Warchief Thaxmer paced back and forth like a caged predator. His massive claws left scratches in the metal floor with each step. He had called for Captain Morrison to join him for a private discussion, hoping to understand what he had witnessed. Jake entered the room carefully. The Vorthok quarters were built for giants, with furniture that was too big for humans and weapons displayed on every wall. Thaxmer gestured for him to sit in a specially prepared smaller chair. Human, Thaxmer began, his four eyes studying Jake intently. Your people have done something that no other species has accomplished in over 1,000 years. You have defeated Vorthok champions in fair combat. I need to understand how this is possible. Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been preparing for. Warchief, may I tell you the real story of humanity? Not the simple version we usually share with other species, but the complete truth? Thaxmer nodded, settling his massive frame into his throne-like chair. Jake began with Earth's early history, spoke of ice ages that lasted for thousands of years, covering most of the planet in snow and ice. He described massive volcanoes that erupted and blocked out the sun, killing most plants and animals. He told of giant asteroids from space that crashed into Earth and destroyed entire continents. But that is not the worst part, Jake continued. The worst part is that these disasters kept changing. Just when our ancestors learned to survive the cold, the planet would become hot. When they learned to live in forests, the forests would turn into deserts. When they found safe places to live, earthquakes would destroy those places. Thaxmer listened carefully. His own world, Kethmer, was deadly but predictable. The acid rain came at the same time every day. The gravity was always 3 times normal. The predators were always the same species with the same hunting methods. The Vorthok had evolved to handle these specific, unchanging threats. Your world sounds chaotic, Thaxmer said. How did your species survive such constant change? By learning that nothing stays the same forever, Jake replied. We learned that the best plan today might be useless tomorrow. We learned that the strongest weapon might not work against the next enemy. So we became experts at adaptation, at changing ourselves when the world around us changed. Sure. Jake went on to describe human history. He told of wars that consumed entire continents where millions of people died fighting each other. He spoke of diseases that killed half the population, forcing the survivors to completely change how they lived. He described famines, floods, and disasters, both natural and man-made. Each time disaster struck, some humans died, Jake explained. But some always survived by finding new ways to live, new solutions to impossible problems. Over thousands of years, this created a species that was defined not by any single strength, but by the ability to become whatever was needed to survive. During this conversation, Dr. Helen Carter was in the ship's medical bay, working with Vorthok scientists to exchange biological data. What she discovered there would shake both species to their core. Helen had been studying genetic samples from both humans and Vorthok. Comparing how the two species had evolved, the results were startling. She called Jake immediately with her. Findings, Captain, you need to hear this. Helen's voice came through the communication device. I've been analyzing the evolutionary data, and I've made an incredible discovery. The Vorthok aren't just from a death world, or from what we might call a stable death world. Jake asked her to explain while Thaxmer listened with growing interest. Earth isn't just dangerous, Helen continued. It's chaotic. Most Deathworlds like Kethmer have consistent threats that species can evolve specific defenses against. But Earth's dangers constantly evolved and changed. This created evolutionary pressure that was completely different from what most species experience. Helen's research showed that while the Vorthok had become the ultimate specialists, perfectly adapted to their specific environment, humans had become the ultimate generalists, able to adapt to anything. War Chief Helen addressed Thaxmer directly. Through the communication link, your species evolved to be the perfect answer to your world's challenges. You became strong, fast, and tough because those traits helped you survive on Kethmer. But humans evolved to be flexible because on Earth, the challenges themselves kept changing. This revelation struck Thaxmer like a physical blow. Everything the Vorthok believed about strength and evolution was based on the idea the strongest species would naturally dominate weaker ones. But these humans suggested something different, that there might be different types of strength entirely. 3 days later, an emergency alarm echoed through both ships. Pirates had attacked a nearby trading station, and civilian ships were calling for help. This would become the moment that proved Helen's theories beyond any doubt. The Vorthok fleet immediately prepared for a traditional response. They would send their fastest warships to the station, destroy the pirate vessels with overwhelming firepower, and rescue any survivors. It was a simple, direct approach that had worked for centuries, but Lieutenant Commander Ryan Bell suggested a different plan. What if we try something the pirates won't expect? It probably studied Vorthok tactics and prepared for a direct assault. Ryan proposed a complex operation that combined multiple approaches simultaneously. Some human ships would approach openly, drawing the pirates' attention. Other ships would sneak around to cut off escape routes. At the same time, human negotiators would try to contact the pirates directly, offering them better deals than whatever they were stealing. The plan also included technological tricks. Amy Rodriguez would hack into the pirate ship's communication systems, spreading confusion and false information. Meanwhile, human psychologists would analyze the pirates' behavior patterns, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited without violence. Thaxmer was skeptical. This plan is too complicated. Too many things could go wrong. The Vorthok way is simpler and more reliable. With respect, War Chief, Ryan replied, the Vorthok way assumes that overwhelming force will always work. But what if the pirates have prepared for that? What if they have hostages or bombs set to destroy the station if they're attacked directly? The rescue operation became a test of both approaches. Vorthok prepared their traditional assault, while the humans implemented their complex, multi-layered plan. When they arrived at the trading station, they found exactly what Ryan had predicted. The pirates had taken hostages and rigged the station with explosives. A direct assault would have killed hundreds of innocent people, but the human plan worked perfectly. While some pirates were distracted by the decoy ships, others found their communications jammed and their escape routes blocked. The human negotiators managed to turn 3 pirate ships into allies by offering them legitimate trading contracts that were more profitable than piracy. The remaining pirates, confused and isolated, surrendered without a fight. The entire operation was completed in 2 hours with 0 casualties. As they returned to the fleet, Thaxmer was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke to Jake in private. Human, today, you have shown me something that challenges everything my species believes. We thought we were strong because we could destroy our enemies. But you were strong because you found a way to win without destroying anyone. Jake nodded. War Chief, strength isn't just about being able to break things. Sometimes real strength means being able to fix things, to build things, to find solutions that help everyone instead of just defeating enemies. The revelation was complete. The Vorthok had spent millennia believing they were the strongest species, because they were the ultimate predators, but humans had shown them that true strength might mean something entirely different. The ability to adapt, to grow, and to find solutions that no one had ever imagined before. Word of the rescue operation spread through the Vorthok fleet even faster than news of the combat tests. Young warriors began asking questions that had never been asked before. 6 months after the first meeting with humans, the Vorthok Empire was changing in ways no one had expected. Word of the human demonstrations had spread to every corner of Vorthok space. On dozens of worlds, young warriors gathered in secret. To discuss these new ideas about strength and adaptation, Sub-Commander Kethver stood before a group of 30 young Vorthok in the lower levels of their home base on the planet Thekra. The meeting was dangerous. Elder war chiefs had forbidden discussions about human tactics, calling them corruptions of true Vorthok strength. Brothers and sisters, Kethver spoke quietly. We have all heard the reports from the human encounter. They defeated our champions, not through greater strength, but through different thinking. Should we not ask ourselves what this means? A young female warrior named Vexanina raised her clawed hand. But Kethver, our elders say that following alien ideas will make us weak. They say the humans are trying to poison our minds with their strange concepts. Then why did their methods work? Asked another warrior. Grixal was beaten by an opponent half his size. Our engineers couldn't solve problems that their engineer fixed in minutes. If these ideas are so weak, how did they give the humans such power? These questions spread like a disease through the younger generation of Vorthok. For the first time in their history, they began to doubt the absolute truth of their traditional teachings. Meanwhile, Commander Susan Clark was working with a small team of humans and Vorthok volunteers to establish the first joint research station. The project was located on a neutral planet between human and Vorthok space. Both governments had agreed to the experiment, though many on both sides had serious doubts. Susan watched as human scientist Dr. Ben Taylor worked alongside Vorthok engineer Grexvar to solve a complex power distribution problem. The two beings could hardly be more different. Ben was small and thin, preferring to think through problems slowly and carefully. Grexvar was massive and powerful, used to solving problems through direct force and overwhelming strength. The human approach makes no sense, Grexvar said, studying Ben's designs. You want to split the power flow into 12 different streams? This makes the system more complicated and harder to maintain. Ben smiled patiently. But it also makes the system more flexible. If one stream fails, the others can compensate. If we need more power in one area, we can redirect it without shutting down the whole system. And what happens when the entire system becomes too complex for anyone to understand? Grexvar asked. Then we build tools to help us understand it, Ben replied. We create systems to monitor other systems. We make backups of backups. The complexity becomes manageable because we planned for it from the beginning. After 3 weeks of working together, they produced a power system that was unlike anything either species had built before. It was more efficient than Vorthok engineering and more robust than human technology. The combination of human flexibility and Vorthok strength created something that neither could have achieved alone. Word of their success reached both homeworlds quickly. More scientists and engineers volunteered for joint projects. Within months, breakthrough discoveries were being announced almost weekly. Lieutenant Commander Tony Martinez found himself assigned to work with a group of young Vorthok warriors who wanted to learn human combat techniques. The assignment was challenging because everything about human fighting went against Vorthok instincts. Your movements are too rigid, Tony explained to a class of 20 Vorthok students. You're so focused on power that you forget about timing and positioning. Watch. Tony demonstrated by sparring with Kethver, who had become one of his most eager students. The young Vorthok warrior was still much stronger and faster than Tony, but he was learning to think differently about combat. Don't just attack where your enemy is, Tony said as they moved around each other. Attack where your enemy will be. Think 3 moves ahead. Make your opponent react to you instead of the other way around. Kethver tried to follow the advice, but his attacks were still too direct and predictable. Tony easily avoided them and countered with moves that seemed to come from nowhere. I don't understand, Kethver said, breathing heavily. You're teaching me to be weaker, not stronger. No, Tony replied. I'm teaching you to be different kinds of strong. Physical power is just one type of strength. There's also mental strength, emotional strength, and tactical strength. The best warriors learn to use all of them together. Slowly, some of the young Vorthok began to understand. They started incorporating human concepts like deception, misdirection, and psychological warfare into their training. The results were impressive. These hybrid fighters could defeat traditional Vorthok warriors, who were physically superior to them. But the changes weren't happening without resistance. Elder War Chief Moxthal led a faction of traditionalist Vorthok, who saw the human influence as a dangerous corruption of their pure warrior culture. "Look what these aliens have done to our young warriors," Moxthal declared at a gathering of senior commanders. "They no longer fight with honor. They use tricks and lies like cowards. They question the wisdom of their elders. It's human poison. Must be stopped before it destroys everything we have built." Moxthal's followers began organizing to drive human influence out of Vorthok space. They attacked joint research stations and arrested young Vorthok, who had been training with human methods. Several violent incidents occurred as traditionalists clashed with progressives. The situation came to a head when Moxthal challenged War Chief Thaxmer to formal combat. According to Vorthok law, whoever won the fight would control the direction of their entire civilization. "You have been corrupted by these weak aliens," Moxthal declared before hundreds of watching warriors. "You forget what it means to be Vorthok. I will remind you and restore our people to their proper path." Thaxmer accepted the challenge, but he did something that shocked everyone present. Instead of fighting in the traditional Vorthok style, he used techniques he had learned from watching human demonstrations. He moved differently, thought differently, and fought with a combination of Vorthok strength and human adaptability. The fight lasted only minutes. Moxthal was stronger and more experienced, but he couldn't adapt to Thaxmer's new fighting style. Every attack he made was anticipated and countered. When Moxthal finally fell, defeated and confused, Thaxmer stood over him with an expression of sad understanding. "Brother," Thaxmer said gently, "you are not weak because you lost this fight. You are limited because you could only think in one way. The humans have taught us that true strength comes from being able to change, to grow, to become more than what we were born to be."
Wow.
The victory secured Thaxmer's position and allowed the transformation to continue. More joint projects were established. Human and Vorthok crews began serving together on exploration missions. Cultural exchange programs were started where young people from both species could learn from each other. The results were remarkable. Systems that had been in rebellion against Vorthok rule for decades suddenly began negotiating for peaceful solutions when approached with human-inspired diplomatic methods. Pirates who had plagued trade routes for centuries found themselves outmaneuvered by hybrid tactics that combined Vorthok strength with human creativity. Most importantly, other species throughout the galaxy began to see the Vorthok differently. Instead of being feared as unstoppable conquerors, they were now viewed as potential partners and protectors. The transformation was spreading beyond just human Vorthok relations to affect the entire galactic community. Commander Clark stood on the observation deck of the Joint Research Station, watching human and Vorthok children playing together in the station's recreation area. The young ones adapted to each other so easily, learning each other's languages and games without the barriers that limited their elders. "It's amazing how quickly they accept each other," said Dr. Taylor, joining her at the window. "Children don't have preconceptions about what's possible," Susan replied. "They don't know that humans and Vorthok are supposed to be too different to work together, so they just do it naturally." In the play area below, a human child was teaching a young Vorthok how to play a strategy game that required careful planning and flexible thinking. The Vorthok child was teaching the human how to climb using strength and determination. Both were learning from each other without even realizing it. But the transformation wasn't complete yet.
Oh.
There were still many traditionalist Vorthok who opposed the changes, and some humans who feared that cooperation might make them vulnerable to alien influence. The biggest challenges lay ahead as both species worked to build something entirely new together. News reports from across the galaxy spoke of a new age beginning. The old system of conquest and domination was slowly being replaced by cooperation and mutual benefit. But creating this new way of life would require both species to continue changing, continue growing, continue learning from each other. The strongest Deathworld species was discovering that their greatest strength might not be their ability to conquer others, but their ability to transform themselves.